Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, the rivalry that shook the UFC. Some rivalries are about championships, others are about respect, but Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz was about something bigger: shock, drama, and history. This is a story of one of the UFC's greatest rivalries. In 2015, Conor McGregor was unstoppable. The Irish superstar had just knocked out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds to become the featherweight champion, and he was chasing two-division glory. McGregor was scheduled to fight lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos in March 2016. But just weeks before the fight, RDA pulled out with an injury. The UFC needed a replacement. Enter Nate Diaz. Fight 1, UFC 196, March 2016. On short notice, Nate Diaz stepped in from the start. It was chaos. McGregor came out swinging, landing heavy shots, but Nate Diaz didn't back down. His toughness, boxing, and jiu-jitsu turned the tide. In the second round, Diaz rocked McGregor with punches, took him down, and secured a rear naked choke. McGregor tapped. The world was stunned. Nate Diaz had just handed the UFC's Golden Boy his first loss in the promotion, and his post-fight words became legendary. "I'm not surprised, motherfucker." The rematch, UFC 202, August 2016. The loss didn't sit well with McGregor. He demanded a rematch. Same opponent, same weight class. At UFC 202, the stage was set for one of the biggest fights in UFC history. The fight was a war. McGregor started strong, dropping Diaz multiple times with his left hand. But Nate, as always, kept coming forward, landing volume and wearing McGregor down. After 5 brutal rounds, McGregor won by majority decision. It was a redemption for Conor, and the rivalry stood 1-1. What made it special? These two fights weren't just about wins and losses. They were about personalities. McGregor, the flashy, trash-talking superstar. Diaz, the laid-back, street-tough underdog who spoke his mind. Together they created some of the most memorable press conferences, quotes, and stare-downs in UFC history. Their fights broke pay-per-view records and elevated both men into legends. The aftermath. Fans always wanted the trilogy. McGregor went to win the lightweight gold and chase super fights, while Diaz picked his moment, staying true to his own path. To this day, the rivalry remains unfinished, tied 1-1, with millions of fans still waiting for part 3. Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz wasn't just a rivalry. It was a culture moment. It gave us shock, redemption, and unforgettable drama. And until the trilogy happens, the story of McGregor versus Diaz will remain one of the UFC's greatest unfinished rivalries. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal, from friends to enemies. Some rivalries are born in a cage, others are born out of betrayal. Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal went from best friends and training partners to bitter enemies. This is the story of their rivalry, the friendship. For years, Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal were inseparable. They lived together, trained together at American Top Team, and even called each other roommates. Covington was a relentless wrestler with cardio for days. Masvidal was a street-bred striker from Miami with knockout power. Together, they pushed each other to the top. They celebrated each other's victories, cornered each other in fights, and called themselves brothers. But that brotherhood didn't last. The fallout. The friendship started to crack in 2018, according to Masvidal. It all began when Colby refused to pay one of Masvidal's coaches after winning an interim title fight. Colby, on the other hand, claimed Masvidal was jealous of his success. The tension spilled out in interviews, on social media, and in the gym. Eventually, things got so bad that the team, American Top Team, had to step in and create some rules to keep fighters from trash-talking each other publicly. But by then, the damage was done. Colby and Jorge went from teammates to bitter rivals. The trash talk. Colby embraced the role of UFC's loudest villain, calling himself Chaos and aiming his trash talk to anyone in his path. But when it came to Masvidal, the words cut deep. He called him Street Judas. He mocked his career. He insulted his family. Masvidal in return labeled Colby a fake, a coward, and someone who betrayed everyone around him. What once was brotherhood had turned into pure hatred. The fight, UFC 272, March 2022. After years of build-up, the grudge match was finally set. Main event, Las Vegas. No titles on the line, just pride. From the opening bell, it was clear Colby's wrestling would be the difference. He smothered Masvidal with pressure, takedowns, and constant pace. Masvidal had his moments, landing big strikes, even wobbling Colby in the 4th round, but it wasn't enough. After 5 rounds, Colby Covington won by unanimous decision. He beat his former best friend. The aftermath. The rivalry didn't end inside the cage. Just weeks later, Masvidal allegedly attacked Covington outside a restaurant in Miami, leading to legal trouble and headlines that kept their feud alive. Even today, the bitterness remains. For Colby, it was proof that he was a superior fighter. For Masvidal, it was personal, something that went far beyond the octagon. Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal wasn't just another fight. It was a story of teammates turned enemies, of brotherhood turned betrayal, and in the end, it became one of the most personal rivalries in UFC history. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. A rivalry across 2 sports. Some rivalries are born in the UFC, but Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira started years before inside a kickboxing ring, and eventually became one of the MMA's greatest storylines. This is the story of the last Stylebender versus Poatan. The kickboxing days. Before either man was in the UFC, there were 2 of the best strikers in the world. Israel Adesanya, flashy, creative, precise. Alex Pereira, a devastating power puncher with one of the scariest left hooks in combat sports. They met for the first time in 2016. Adesanya had early success with his movement and striking, but Pereira landed the hardest shots and won by a decision. A year later, in 2017, the rematch happened. Once again, Adesanya looked sharp until the 3rd round, when Pereira landed his signature left hook and knocked Izzy out cold. Pereira was now 2-0 over Adesanya in kickboxing, and a rivalry was born. Adesanya's UFC reign. Adesanya transitioned to MMA and quickly rose to stardom. By 2019, he was UFC middleweight champion, defending his belt against the best in the world. Fans always wondered, what if Alex Pereira came to MMA? By 2021, Pereira did just that. He signed with the UFC and immediately became the hype. The man who knocked out Israel Adesanya in kickboxing was now chasing him in MMA. The first UFC fight, UFC 281, November 2022. The 2 finally met in the UFC middleweight title. This time, the stakes were higher. Adesanya fought brilliantly, outstriking Pereira and nearly finishing him at the end of round 1. Going into final round, Izzy was ahead on the scorecards. But history repeated itself. In round 5, Pereira unleashed his power, cornering Adesanya against the cage and landing a barrage of punches. The referee stepped in. Pereira had done it again, this time in MMA. He was now 3-0 over Adesanya across 2 sports, and the new UFC middleweight champion. The rematch. UFC 287, April 2023. Adesanya refused to let the story end there. Just months later, the rematch was set. This time, Izzy flipped the script. In round 2, as Pereira pressed forward, Adesanya baited him and landed a brutal counter right hand. Pereira collapsed and Adesanya finished him with hammer fists. The last Stylebender had finally beaten his rival. In spectacular fashion, Izzy's celebration, pretending to shoot arrows back at Pereira, symbolized years of frustration released in one victory. The legacy. Adesanya versus Pereira wasn't just a rivalry. It was a saga that spanned multiple sports, multiple fights, and two of the best strikers on the planet. Pereira proved he had Izzy's number for years. Adesanya finally got redemption on the biggest stage. And though both men have gone on to new challenges, their rivalry will always be remembered as one of the most compelling in combat sports. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about history, redemption, and two warriors pushing each other to greatness. A rivalry for the ages. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor, the battle of pride and legacy. In the world of mixed martial arts, rivalries don't get much heated than Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Conor McGregor. It wasn't just about titles or rankings. It was about pride, culture, and legacy. This is the story of one of the most intense and personal rivalries the sport has ever seen. The early days. Khabib, the undefeated Russian champion, was a man of few words, a quiet, dominant force. Khabib let his fighting do the talking. With an unbreakable grip on the lightweight division, Khabib was feared for his relentless wrestling, pressure, and iron will. On the other hand, Conor McGregor, the brash, outspoken Irishman, was a complete opposite. With the gift of gab and a knockout left hand, Conor quickly became the face of the UFC, bringing flair, drama, and charisma to every fight. They were two polar opposites, Khabib the disciplined warrior and Conor the loud and proud showman. But the rivalry didn't start until Conor McGregor's arrogance collided with Khabib's unshakable discipline. The trash talk begins. In 2017, McGregor was on top of the world, a two-division champion. Conor was running the UFC, trash-talking anyone and everyone. Khabib was just another name to Conor, an undefeated, dangerous threat he could ridicule and challenge. Conor's first attack, a simple jab about Khabib's culture and background. He called Khabib a little chicken and mocked his Russian heritage, saying he was stuck in the mountains. But Khabib wasn't the kind of fighter to engage in mind games. He didn't care for McGregor's antics. He didn't need the spotlight. He was focused on one thing, winning. But that didn't stop McGregor. He took things further. Conor insulted Khabib's team, his father, and his religion, constantly throwing verbal jabs to get under his skin. This was no longer about just fighting. This was about disrespect. The bus incident, April 2018. Then came the moment that changed everything. During UFC 223's media day, Conor McGregor, with a group of his allies, stormed the bus that Khabib was on. What started as a prank quickly escalated into chaos. Conor threw a dolly through the bus window, shattering glass and injuring fighter Michael Chiesa. It was an act of violence that not only threatened to derail the entire event, but shook the very foundations of MMA. For Khabib, this was personal. Conor had crossed the line. It wasn't just trash talk anymore. It was pure aggression. The build-up to UFC 229. After the bus incident, UFC 223 saw Khabib Nurmagomedov claim the lightweight title, but Conor McGregor wasn't going to let that slide. The feud was far from over. Conor returned to UFC 229 with one goal: take the belt and get revenge. Leading up to the fight, the media buildup was pure warfare. The insults and threats, the personal attacks. McGregor and Khabib went back and forth, creating a storm of tension. Khabib was cold and calculated, while Conor turned up the volume with his antics, taunts, and mind games. But despite all the drama, Khabib's message was clear. He was here to humble Conor McGregor. UFC 229, October 6, 2018. The fight. The stage was set. Las Vegas. Khabib versus McGregor. The fight itself was a clash of styles. Khabib's overwhelming grappling and pressure versus Conor's dangerous striking and quickness. Conor had his moments early, landing some solid shots, even controlling the first round. But Khabib's plan was never to stand with Conor. It was to take him down, wear him out, and break him. And that's exactly what happened. By the fourth round, Khabib dominated. After a relentless series of takedowns and control, Khabib locked in a neck crank, that forced Conor to tap out. The world erupted. Khabib had done it. He defeated the brash Irishman and claimed victory. The post-fight chaos. But the story didn't end with Khabib's win. As Conor was still recovering from the loss, Khabib leaped over the cage, diving into the crowd to attack Conor's cornerman, Dylan Dennis. The arena was thrown into chaos. Security rushed in, the crowd erupted into a frenzy, and UFC was left to pick up the pieces. Khabib was fined and suspended, but he didn't care. For him, this wasn't about money or the fame. It was about respect. Khabib later explained his actions by saying, "Conor took it to a personal level with me and my family, so I had to defend my honor." For Khabib, it wasn't just about fighting, it was about protecting his legacy. The aftermath. Legacy of a rivalry. Khabib went on to dominate the lightweight division, retiring undefeated in 2020. Conor, however, was never the same. The loss of Khabib seemed to mark a turning point in his career, with many questioning whether he could ever return to his former glory. Khabib's win over McGregor is often seen as one of the greatest moments in MMA history. It wasn't just about beating the man who had trash-talked him and his people. It was about proving that discipline and respect would always prevail over ego and arrogance. For Khabib, it was more than a fight. It was a statement to the world. Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov wasn't just a rivalry. It was a clash of cultures, personalities, and legacies. It was a battle between the loudest showman and the quietest champion. A battle for pride, for respect, and for the right to claim the title of the greatest. In the end, Khabib's victory wasn't just about the belt. It was about showing the world that discipline, respect, and honor will always be stronger than trash talk and controversy. The rivalry between Khabib and McGregor might be over, but its impact on the sport, that's something that will be felt for years to come. Few rivalries in UFC history burn as hot as Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. This wasn't just about championships. This was about pride, legacy, and pure hatred between two of the greatest fighters ever to step into the octagon. Background, setting the stage. Jon Bones Jones burst onto the scene in the late 2000s, become the youngest UFC champion in history at just age 23. His dominance, creativity, and physical gifts made him nearly untouchable. On the other side was Daniel Cormier, a former Olympic wrestler who climbed through the heavyweight division before moving down to light heavyweight. Cormier was undefeated, disciplined, and built on hard work. Two elite fighters destined to collide. The beef begins. In 2014, tensions exploded. At a media event, Jon Jones and Cormier got into a heated face-off that turned into an all-out brawl on stage. Punches were thrown, suits were ripped, and the rivalry went from competitive to personal overnight. Behind the scenes, leaked footage of Jon Jones and Cormier trash-talking went viral. Jon told DC, "I will absolutely kill you," and DC fired back, "I'm going to spit in your face." This wasn't just hype, they genuinely hated each other. The first fight, UFC 182, January 2015. After months of trash talk, they finally fought at UFC 182. It was brutal, competitive, but in the end, Jon Jones outstruck and out-wrestled Cormier, handing him his first professional loss. Jones proved he was still the king, but the hatred only grew. The fallout. Shortly after, Jones' career spiraled. He was stripped of the title following legal issues, leaving Cormier to win the vacant title. But critics constantly reminded him he never beat Jones. For Cormier, it was a shadow over his championship reign. The rematch. UFC 214, July 2017. Jones and Cormier finally ran it back. This time, the fight was closer, but in the third round, Jones landed a devastating head kick, followed by a ground and pound to knock out Cormier. It looked like redemption for Jones until controversy struck again. Just weeks later, Jones tested positive for a banned substance. The win was overturned to a no contest, and Cormier was reinstated as champion. For DC, it was bittersweet. He had his belt back, but still no clean victory over Jones. Legacy and aftermath. Their rivalry defined an era. Jones, despite suspensions and setbacks, is still considered by many most talented fighter ever. Cormier went on to become a 2-division champion in heavyweight and lightweight, cementing his own legacy. And while they'll never be friends, both men admit the rivalry pushed them to greatness. Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier wasn't just a fight, it was a clash of styles, personalities, and legacies. A rivalry built on hatred, but remembered as one of the greatest in MMA history. And that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you for watching. Please remember to drop a like, a comment, and do follow the channel. I do stream on Twitch almost every single day at the channel I Am Iron Kage, and you can follow me on all platforms, Instagram and Twitter. I Am Iron Kage and I Am Iron Brian. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time, maybe with another top 5. Peace.
Forgive me, Lord, cause I'm sinning when I'm to protect and maintain one's own ninja way.